Hey guys, and welcome to QualityShot. Novak Djokovic has given his full interview to the BBC, and it was a very interesting one, to be fair. Very intriguing. If you do want to check out the full interview, do check it out on BBC. I think it's on BBC iPlayer. I don't think they have it on their actual website, but it was a very interesting listen. I think it's just under half an hour, and some interesting insights coming out of it. Also, can I just say before we get into it, kudos to the interviewer whose name I've completely forgotten, which I'll remember in a second. He was very good, I thought, in terms of his questions. He didn't hold back. He wasn't just extremely friendly. I think he asked some very penetrating questions, and he didn't hold back. And I think that's what we would have wanted, especially given it's the first time Novak Djokovic has talked, even since that whole debacle in Australia. So it was, Amol Rajan from BBC. He went to Belgrade. So I think to Djokovic's tennis academy, it looks like one of the meeting rooms they were in there. Basically doing it on Djokovic's terms, which is understandable, of course, given he is, the type of player he is and the type of personality he is. So, they went to Belgrade, had a sit down. It was intriguing. I mean, first of all, he asked him at the start, look, how come you're willing to do this? He said, and why now? He said, well, firstly, I didn't want to do it during, the Australian Open and straight after because I wanted to respect my colleagues who'd been, playing in that huge tournament. I didn't want to be a distraction. I think, to be fair to him, during the whole situation in Australia, he did say the same thing. So he waited in terms of timeline. I think that was really intelligent, personally, and probably the right thing to do as well. In terms of why he's now talking, though, right? Forget about timeline. Let's talk about the reason why he's come out to talk. He said it was. I think I'll paraphrase. He just said, and obviously, this can be taken in a different way. You can twist anything though, and nowadays, he just said, "Look, I want to clarify certain things because I can see in the media I've been portrayed in lots of different lights and different stories have come out. So I thought it was only right for me to come out and clarify certain things about the whole process, my vaccination status, my I guess and really just give the truth about the whole situation." So I'm going to break this down. I don't want to talk too long about it because if you do want to watch the whole video and the whole interview, even you can watch it on the BBC, but this is more to give my kind of two pennies even. So yes, obviously yesterday we did a quick video and I said that look, he's willing to forego the tournaments. That was still evident in the fuller length interview, that he is still sometimes people take snips and little clips and it can be misleading. It wasn't misleading. He said that the same thing in the full interview, part of that clip, and then obviously extending onto that as well, and just said, look, I probably won't be able to play most of the tournaments at the moment because of my vaccination status. He confirmed, by the way, that he has not had the COVID vaccine. The interviewer asked him, which I thought, again, you can just assume, but why assume when you can ask? And I thought the fact that he was willing to ask and some of the questions he was willing to ask, I thought were really, really good. And at the end of the day, what's the worst that can happen? Djokovic says no. So he confirmed that he hasn't had COVID vaccine. The interview asked him why. He said, look, I'm really particular about what I put into my body, and I've done that for the past 20 years, and what I put into my body is more important than even competing, in Grand Slam. So that's how strongly he feels about having a freedom of choice, is what I think he said, to quote him, about choosing what goes into my body, which, okay, in terms of a general, I think, thought and way of thinking, I think is pretty normal to think like that. I think the issue that a lot of people are having, given what I've seen on social media, and this is just me looking at it from taking a step back and looking at it overall, not just the interview, but also what people are then responding to on social media, etc., is that there are reports, and again, I don't know if it's true, that he's the only top 100 player at this current moment to not be vaccinated. So that to me is interesting because a lot of players, they didn't particularly want to get it and they got it anyway because they just wanted to play tennis, right? I think for Djokovic, he's holding firm, which is admirable in the sense that that's what he believes in, and he's kind of just staying true to what he believes in. Which I think a lot of people, I think everyone can kind of relate to that. But on the other hand, a lot of people saying, everyone else is following the rules, everyone else is willing to do it. Why isn't he? Now, I would be more annoyed if he, for example, was trying to find ways around it. And that kind of brings us on nicely onto the whole Australian Open saga. So I think from what he was saying in the interview, he wasn't looking to try and find ways around it. He did say that, look, the interviewer, to be fair, it was a leading question, said, look, the Australian Prime Minister said that no one should get special treatment. Do you agree? And he said, yes, I'm not trying to abuse my status or elevator status to get preferential treatment. I am, just trying to follow the rules. And obviously, when the medical exemption came up and we found out that we were eligible for it, obviously, I wanted to play Australia. So I took that route and I understood that it might not work out. I might not play Australia, but I was willing not to do it. Not to play, sorry, if that was the case. So interestingly, he said that. He also then said, this is more of a clarification point on the whole saga, because there's so many things coming out of that. So there was a error made by his agent on the documentation, which I think, if I'm not mistaken, is the initial and it was the initial visa rejection. And that came about because the error he made stated that he'd been nowhere else before Australia apart from Serbia. However, and the interview they confirmed this as well, he had been to Spain in between. So Djokovic said, yeah, it was my mistake as well. Obviously, he was saying it wasn't me, but at the end of the day, the buck, kind of falls with me, which is understandable. And he, I think he just put his hands on and said, look, we made a mistake, basically. We made a mistake and we paid for it because I didn't end up playing in the tournament. And then, of course, he briefly talked about the detention center, said it wasn't an ideal experience. It wasn't particularly good. And then he said, okay, right. For me, yes, I think that, for me, tennis is a huge part of my life, but not so huge that I'm going to give in basically to my morality, which I can kind of, fine, again, up to him. Everyone's got personal choices. What was interesting though is that when he was talking about the detention center, he said that he was there for 7 days, but he's not going to complain about it too much because he knows people that have been there for years. And I don't doubt him when he says that. And he said, look, the conditions weren't great, but I'd had it easy compared to some others. Then he also said regarding, which I thought was quite interesting, he kind of talked about the fact that, he is open to having the vaccine at some point. I mean, he didn't say, he just said, look, I'm not closed-minded to having it. However, from what he said in every other part of the interview indicates to me that he's not going to be taking it anytime soon, but he's not 100% sure about it going into his body at this current time. He's not confident about the effect it will have on his body. Then on top of that, we had a very, very interesting kind of conversation about the Adria Tour. So that was very, very interesting. So the Adria Tour was intriguing, very intriguing. That was obviously where that was ended up being a super spreader event, right? So there were other people there. Of course, it wasn't just him, but he organized it. So it was himself. There was Zverev was there. Team was there. Now, there were no masks being worn, etc., like crowds. He said in defense to the Adria Tour, because he said, look, a lot of people are saying that you are not serious about COVID after the Adria Tour, etc. Like, you have basically, in not as many words as to say that he doesn't really take it seriously. He's got a track record of really not abiding by the rules and not really giving two hoots really about COVID. Now, he, in defense, came back and said, look, at the time, Serbia, they didn't have those rules in place. Of course, other countries did have those rules in place, which is why a lot of people were so outraged as to what was going on the Adria Tour. But he said in Serbia at the time, the rules weren't that you had to wear masks, you didn't have to socially distance, etc., etc. So I get that. Then in terms of the Adria Tour, he said, look, and what was interesting is that he held firm, so he didn't actually say that it was a mistake. I think he has apologized in the past about it, but he didn't apologize in this video or this interview. He actually didn't. He held firm. He didn't say, "Oh, I made a mistake," or "It was a mistake." He said, "No, the rules were in place because of X, Y, and Z." Then, of course, they went into the specifics around the Australia saga again and talked about how, the fact that, yes, there was the mistake by agent made, and then also, he was talking about, I guess, the fact that in Australia, he was seen as, I guess, triggering an anti-vax movement, which he said, look, I've never said I'm an anti-vaxxer. No one's ever asked me about my beliefs on it. He actually, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure he does say this. He says that actually he was vaccinated as a child, but basically the reason why he has this really fiercely independent nature about what goes into his body and kind of what happens to his physical state is because, when obviously he came from like a war-torn Serbia when he was very small, and hasn't had a privileged upbringing. His parents were not particularly well off. He chose a very expensive sport, and he had to become very self-reliant at a very young age. Had to travel to tournaments by himself, or without his parents anyway. And he has this kind of fierce resolve, which I think we saw in the interview, and we see, to be fair, in his tennis style as well. Right, is that kind of that willingness to really go till the end, and he is really a comeback king, to use a cliche. So that was extremely interesting, hearing about that, and also hearing about why I guess he's so willing to forego any vaccination against COVID, um, even if it means missing major tournaments, even if it means potentially, like the interviewer mentioned, uh, it could mean that he doesn't become statistically, it could mean that statistically he doesn't become the greatest player of all time statistically. Um, in a lot of people's eyes, he will be the greatest of all time anyway now, and probably will be in the future. But obviously, in others, he won't be, and that's just the nature of people's opinions. So it was extremely interesting. I do recommend giving it a watch. I'm trying to think if there's any other points that I need to touch upon that I missed. Oh, he did say, actually, which is quite funny, that his son was cheering for Nadal in the final. His wife was cheering for Medvedev, and he said he wasn't really cheering for anyone. Although I think secretly, deep down, surely he was cheering on Medvedev. But I think, like, I mean, I'll take it at face value. He said he wasn't cheering for anyone because I think he said it with a little bit of a tinge of disappointment that, look, I just wanted to be there. Um, I felt like, I just wanted to be in that moment. And I can understand that, and I can get that. So that was interesting. And yeah, that was really intriguing. But his son being a fan of Nadal is very unexpected. And then I think he asked so he asked Novak, his son asked Djokovic, can I get a picture with Nadal? And he said, yeah, I'm sure we can sort that out, which is really funny. It's almost like, who is it? Well, if you guys are fans of football, I think it's Lionel Messi's son. He like basically abuses like Lionel Messi and like always cheers for the other team. And I think he like supports Ronaldo and stuff. And it's just he just trolls his dad, which is quite funny. But I'm guessing it's not that. I think he just is a fan of his, which is understandable. Like, you know, who knows? Maybe some of Roger's kids are fans of Novak, for example. Obviously, Nadal doesn't have any kids at this point, but yeah, very interesting. Anything else that I could think of that I think is quite worth pointing out? Obviously, he said that a lot of the time he's in the Belgrade Center, so this is more just kind of interesting info. And they showed a couple of clips of him training kids in his Belgrade tennis academy, giving tips, etc. And that was interesting. I thought that, you know, he said, look, he just loves tennis. All he wants to do is play tennis. The reason why he keeps on playing is because he still has that love for tennis that he had when he was 4 years old. And, you know, he wants to just play tennis all the time, every day. And he said, you know, I'm still that person, which is interesting. And obviously, kind of just explaining that the fire's still there. There's maybe, I guess, squashing, which I don't think there were any rumors that, you know, he could potentially retire, etc. I think, you know, no one was saying that. But I think if they were, that kind of, I think, explains the fact that, well, that's not the case. He'll just play all the tournaments that he can play, right? That's what he'll do. He'll play all the tournaments that he can play. I think Tim Henman, obviously, I mentioned in the previous video, did say that at the moment, given the current guidelines, he would be allowed at Wimbledon. From what he knows, he's part of the All England Tennis Club committee, and said that, you know, obviously, from what he knows, he could. For Roland Garros, they have those strict rules, so as it stands, he wouldn't be allowed to play that. I think we can probably safely say that. Well, I think Australian Open and Wimbledon is probably his best bets in terms of like strongest chances. Roland Garros obviously won it last year. I mean, he's still a huge contender there. But Nadal, I think, is always favourite. And then US Open is kind of like anyone can take that. I mean, he'd go into one of the favourites, but it's one of those tournaments where no one's defended it since Del Potro won it in 2009. So it is a roundabout tournament, and it can be so random at times. I think that's pretty much it. So thank you guys very much for tuning in. Please remember to smash the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. I think we will maybe potentially do another video on this, although only if obviously new information comes to light. But it was interesting. Also, actually, sorry, I completely forgot to mention, it's really important about the PCR timings. God, I nearly forgot that. So the PCR timings were him asking, look, you know, were you aware that, look, you know, that you only got the PCR readings because obviously they sent it out the day before. This is when he was alerted that he tested positive, but then the next day, you clearly, you know, went to go and see kids and gave out awards, and then he confirmed, yeah, you know, like I didn't know about that. You know, I didn't know about the test results until the following day, and then he then again confirmed, which we already know, that at L'Equipe, like he went to that, he had that interview and sit down, even though he knew he was positive and he didn't tell anyone. He did also ask the interview, which I thought was really interesting. Did you notify the parents of the kids, or did you make sure that the kids were aware that you tested positive? And he said, "Yep, we did. We did." So interesting. Anyway, thank you very much, guys, for tuning in. Please do remember to stay safe and well. Please remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And of course, we'll see you on the next video. Do remember as well to follow us on Discord, and we are now on Spotify as well, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all those good ones. Thank you very much, guys. Stay safe and well. I'll see you.